I haven't. Okay, then I need to make more deposits. And deposits are everything. They're from, maybe for a spouse, it's like flowers and chocolates, something spontaneous. Maybe it's just time, right? I won't go through all the Gary Smalley love languages, but they're out there. You can go look at them to see what is your love language. I'm affirmation, of course. I need someone to tell me I'm great, right? Mr. Arrogant speaker. But it makes me feel good. My wife knows that, so she tells me, hey, you're great. You're going to do great, right? But if you figure that out, then you know how to make the deposits appropriately. Another one is, and I think this is so good. We really have to think about if I'm present where my feet are standing, then I have to think about the next step has to be the best step. Too often when we have kids, we think, what are they going to be? And maybe they enter in high school and you're like, 4 years from now, and you're thinking future. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think really you have to consider, what is the next best step that I need to make right now in this relationship, in this discipline process, in this situation, at my job, whatever it might be. You have to think about the next step. If you can be great every next step, then 4 years down the road, guess what? You're going to be great because you focused on the next step and you had a plan. And it'll guide and direct, and someone will try and bump you off your step, and those things will happen. But if you're focused on how can I make that next step the best step possible, it's a lot easier to focus on that versus panic mode of my kid has a 2.3 GPA and they're supposed to graduate in 16 months. That's panic. Okay, what do I need to do now to help that kid, right? Next step, best step. I think when you sum up all of these things, I want to make sure you hear something that's really important. I really don't believe that we can hey, I'm mediocre at my job, but man, I'm a great parent. I don't think there's such a thing. I really don't. I think we think that, but when I sit down and I talk to the 17, 18, 16, 15, 14-year-old kids, and you ask them, they know which of their parents work hard, which of them don't like their job, which of them are maybe alcoholic, or which one badmouths dad when he's not around. I always tell the story of, I remember this so vividly, happened in my house all the time. Mom's screaming at us, kids go da-da-da-da-da. Phone rings, hello, Watson residence. And you're like, how did she do that? She was so mad to answer the phone to paint the perfect picture. Well, if you imagine a kid seeing that over and over and over, right? They begin to do that pretty well. Hey, I'm going to be sick. I call it the one-day sickness. It's always test day. One-day sickness. Kids don't show up. People don't show up. You're like, hey, what happened? I was sick. One-day sickness. You look great. Don't you have a game tonight? Yep, I'm going to play football tonight too. Well, I think we see that and we begin to grab these patterns from our parents, right? And if we're not presently thinking about what's that next step and how do I have a conversation about that, they can't really help us earn the greatest story ever told. I think it's really important that we understand, and I know people push work-life balance, and I'm not going to completely bamboozle that. I don't believe in balance, really. Let me tell you what I believe in. I believe in rhythm. I believe in rhythm. If you look at how a business structures and runs, and then you think about how a life runs, they really run in rhythms, right? Maybe at the end of third quarter, things are crazy at work. So that means in the second quarter and the first quarter, I'm spending as much time as I can with my spouse and my kid, so that then maybe I'm less around in the third quarter. That's you being intentional about your rhythm, right? Same thing, maybe my spouse, she wants me to take off a week for spring break. And so I know that's going to be a time when I get to spend a lot of time. So the week before that, I make sure to get caught up on work. That's rhythm. I don't believe in balance. I don't know how you balance. I think you would die. I'm going to be 120% here and 120% here. I know that's what we teach people, but I really don't believe in it. I think I may be 120 here and 80 over here, right? No one wants to admit it, so they just say they're 120, but you're really not. How great would it be? It's honey, I love you, but I can only give 75. Okay, work, you get 125. Because when I do that, guess what? Now my spouse says, okay, I got to make that up. I got to be 125 over here. Because I was intentional about the rhythm. And we had the communication. And it was intentional. That's the first strategy I would say about earning a great life story is being intentional. And we don't do it. We don't earn our story. Our story happens to us. The pages just kind of write themselves. And then we look back and we're 70. And we're man, I would have done that different. And I wish I would have. What if, wish I would have. What if, I wish I would have. You don't want that. On average, they say, in America, we live till we're 78, and in the world, 71. So I'm 35. I know I look good for 35, don't I? I needed that affirmation. You should have said yes. So that means I tell myself, okay, that means you have 43 years left. So I put it that way, that seems like a good amount of time. Now if I say, man, I'm 2 times the age of these kids here in my class, I'm going through a midlife crisis. Like when I put it that way, it doesn't give me very much strength to be intentional. So I would challenge you to really think about like, this is the gap of years that I have left, and if I take good care of myself, that means I got 40 years left to do what I want to earn a great life story. Stories are what's left after we're gone. They leave a ripple effect, right? And if you don't intentionally live your story, then I promise you this, your kids won't either. Your kids won't either. You want them to be the best version of themselves. If you're a 7 and you want your kid to be an 8, the only way to make them an 8 is by you trying to grow from a 7 to an 8, and they see that. Otherwise, they only become 7s. That's the hard thing. That's a transitional moment. If you're growing in the transition, then I can become from a 7 to an 8, and my kid sees that. Now, I'm going to tell you the number one epidemic that's going on with young people is they don't see failure and they don't experience failure enough. They don't see it from you. You hide it from them. I teach a personal financial literacy class. The first thing I do in class is go home and ask your parents how they're investing. 1 out of 30 will tell them. Why? I don't know. My guess is they're embarrassed. They don't think it's right to talk about money. They don't do it at all. I don't know. They just don't do it, right? I'm not telling you have to tell your kids all of those kind of things, but what I am seeing is they need to see you fail. They need to see you mess up. They need to see that you're not Superman. Let the cape fall off earlier so you can go back and say, this is how I grew from that. And it's okay. I mess up too. When they start seeing that, I think then they feel like it's okay if I mess up because I'm focusing on the next step. And if I step in a big pothole, I know how to get out of it. The problem is we're setting them up for failure because when they graduate high school or they get into high school and they make a mistake, it's the end of the world. First time I've experienced failure, oh no. And then what happens? Well, what happens is we put them on some medication or we take them to the doctor or a host of other really bad things that I'm not going to go into, but those happen. So I think we have to be really conscious about allowing our kids to see us fail a little bit, allowing our kids to see what that looks like. The last tactic I'll tell you that I think is key in earning a great life story is awareness. We should be doing this throughout our lives, but I don't think we do it enough. If we will become more aware of who we are, what that means is I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, I know how I'm trying to improve these strengths, I know how I'm trying to I know how I'm trying to improve these weaknesses, I know how I'm trying to use these strengths to grow. I had a good conversation in the back with a few of the committee members here, and they were telling me, like, what's great about the place here you work is that you feel like there's a path. Like you have an idea of like, okay, I can go to that, and then I can go to that, and then if I get this done, I can do this, and there's at least a vision of what the future could hold, right? Well, in education, it's not that way. Usually it's like, hey, you're doing a great job. Pat on the back. Keep doing what you're doing. Great job. But there's really no path. And so I think the difficulty with that is if I don't have a vision for the future, then I don't know how to improve these weaknesses and how to use these strengths. You gotta get a vision for the future. Next step, best step, next step. That's my vision. Next step, best step, next step, best step. Defining moment to defining moment. I asked a young girl in my class, I said, how do you find a picture to show rhythm? And I couldn't really come up with one. She's like, I think of music, I think of dancing. And I'm like, that's really true. So I put a picture up there because I think that probably identifies rhythm the best. So I want you to imagine, depending on who you are in the picture, of whether whoever you are, you're the lead or you're not, or whoever is with you, right? It's a spouse, it's a friend, it's your kids. You really got to think about what is the rhythm for us and how we're going to operate, how we're going to flow, how their life works, how my life works, how I'm being really intentional about what that life looks like. My dad, he was a publisher of a newspaper, local ad newspaper. When I was 12 years old, he used to send me on these trips to go sell ads with him. I think I was cuter, is why maybe, or the farmers would buy from me more than Dad. So he'd send me out, so I started learning how to sell and what that looked like, and Dad would teach me stuff. And what I loved about my dad was, my dad would go into environments, and he would know when he went into the guy that had 12 employees that needed to sell his tractor, Dad's taking the tie off and the jacket off and rolling up the sleeves and going in with 2 styrofoam cups of coffee. And then when he went back and he had to go meet with somebody that was running the a location that was selling millions of dollars, he put it all back on and he went in, right? And Dad was really good about the empathy part. He wanted to make sure that he hey, I can get on any level that I need to have a conversation that's necessary for you to feel great about this moment. My dad had 3 kids. We all were athletes. We all were choir. We were all in everything. And Dad made it to everything. And my dad was really loud. You could hear him from a mile away. Everyone always commented how loud Dad was. But I didn't care. I knew he was there. It was great, right? He was present. He was present where his feet were standing. He wasn't thinking about work. He was cheering number 16 on as loud as he possibly could. Probably yelling at the referees and the umpires as well. But so, my mom worked nights as a nurse. And so their relationship was actually really great. And I don't know how they made that work, because it was like, hey, I'm awake during the day. You're sleeping. Okay, I'm going to work. Hey, great seeing you. It's like two ships passing, right? And when my dad was 44, you guys have Sonics here? You guys know what a Sonic is? Okay, I didn't know where they were geographically. I apologize. So my dad's on the way to Sonic every Sunday. He went to go pick up drinks for the family. And I'm living in Wichita. I'm the only one married. And my dad dies in his car. And the car was in drive, and Dad passed away in the car, and he was 44. And that's really, I think, for me, where I went to the funeral, about 26. I went to the funeral, and the room was so full that they had people standing out in the back, and there were no TVs. They were standing out in the back, listening in. And I was sitting about right here, and I said, Dad, I told the pastor, I was like, hey, I want to step up and say something. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, please, let me say something. And this is all I said. I said, what was great about my dad is that, he has forged a legacy for my future. And I'll tell you why. Because we have everybody in here, from the CEO of one of the largest companies in our town to this guy was his janitor. And what my dad did great is that he impacted the person in the moment that he was in. Whether it was at work and that customer that he was working with, right? He was present. If it was his kid's ball game, his spouse, he was present in that moment. And about 3 weeks before he passed, I remember him sitting down with, I think it was the pastor of the church or something like that. And he just said, I feel really good that I've accomplished everything I was supposed to in life. I was like, well, you got a lot of life to live, don't you? And it was weird because Dad had I don't know what you call it, but premonition or just this feeling, right? And so what I would tell you is that we don't know how many days we have. So we have to live intentionally, because someday there will be a tombstone. Let me tell you what I've never seen on a tombstone. I've never seen net worth. Never seen square footage of a house. Never seen those degrees that he read about that I have. Never seen a job title. What we normally see is beloved son, beloved father, beloved wife. So at the end of our lives, if that's how we're remembered, by how we were as a son or daughter or a father or a mother, then we have to make sure that we're intentional when we're with those people, that we're impacting those people. Because how we work with our customers is how we're also going to parent. It's also how we're going to be a spouse. They're not mutually exclusive. They're not. I'll be remembered as this, but I can only be great at this if I try my very hardest to be great in these moments at work. They really go hand in hand. Last thing I'll tell you is that as a 35-year-old new parent, that the one thing that I want more than anything else is that when I pass away and I move on, I want my kid to have permission to succeed and dream as big as possible. But I'll promise you this, my legacy is going to be hollow if I don't make an effort to impact my kid's life and impact people's lives every single day like I'm trying to today. And my kid will not have permission to succeed if he doesn't see Dad every day try to intentionally earn the greatest story ever told. Thank you.